Awesome.
Uh, I'm going to kind of share some textbook, if you will, from the ELCA's standpoint, and also bring in some other facets that I have learned. I've been studying accompaniment for about 10 years now, 10 or 11 years. And it is absolutely a living methodology, living, breathing, changing methodology. And I believe that it is something that doesn't just apply to mission. I think that it applies to life. And so I hope that you will think of it in that way if you aren't already. And it is something that is very intertwined with everything that we do. We have from our social justice things, from worship, from everything that we do. And so I think that, well, we'll just start. And the other thing that I did want to say is if you have questions, don't feel like you have to wait until a certain point. You can feel free to unmute and pop in with a question. So this doesn't have to be real formal, and feel free that you can ask your question at the time that you have it. This is the formal definition of accompaniment. It is walking together in solidarity that practices interdependence and mutuality. In this walk, gifts, resources, and experiences are shared with mutual advice and admonition to deepen and expand our work within God's mission. In short, it's walking alongside, but this is the full definition. And walking together in solidarity, I think, is something that is the important phrase to remember. I wanted to share a very short video with Reverend Rafael Malpika Padilla. He is an ELCA pastor. Voltzes, you can probably tell better than I am. I think that you could probably call him the father of accompaniment. I wish that you could just listen to him for an hour, because he is absolutely fascinating. And he has he has about a 38-minute video that you can get to on the ELCA's website under accompaniment. But I will just play a short segment of it so that you can hear a portion of it. But before we do that, I want to read to you from 2 Corinthians 5, chapter 16 through verses 16 through 20, because that is a basis for accompaniment and why we are doing this. And of course, I put my Bible here out of the way. This is what is leading into his video. So 2 Corinthians 5 verses 16 through 20. So stop evaluating Christians by what the world thinks about them or by what they seem to be like on the outside. Once I mistakenly thought of Christ that way, merely as a human being like myself. How differently I feel now. When someone becomes a Christian, he becomes a brand new person inside. He is not the same anymore. A new life has begun. All these new things are from God, who brought us back to himself through what Christ Jesus did. And God has given us the privilege of urging everyone to come into his favor and be reconciled to him. For God was in Christ, restoring the world to himself, no longer counting men's sins against them, but blotting them out. This is the wonderful message he has given us to tell others. We are Christ's ambassadors. God is using us to speak to you. We beg you, as though Christ himself were here pleading with you, receive the love he offers you. Be reconciled to God. And now I would like to have you hear from Reverend Malpika Padilla. Let me...
That understanding of mission as restoration of community. We learn in our confirmation class that God, through Christ, restored community with me as an individual. And that's what we call, in Lutheran language, justification. That movement from God through Christ to restore community with me. And in restoring community with me, God says to me, Rafael, you don't have to worry about mending your relationship with me. I have taken care of that through Christ. And through this gift of the Christ event, I am restoring relationship with you, and I am freeing you from that which precludes you from opening yourself to the gift that I am given. According to Luther, the word sin for us is what he called incurvatus in se, a very fancy Latin word to describe what we can call today a navel gazing, or what I say, the belly button approach, to be always looking inward. That does not allow you to enter into community with the others. So once God restored community with me, God says to me, forget about your own self, because from now on, I have one job for you, and that is to restore communities with the others. To restore communities with the other. Once I have restored the community with you, your job is to restore community with the others. And that's what we Lutherans call sanctification. God restoring community with me, and through me, God restoring community with the others among ourselves. Now we need to understand that this process of restoring community with others is not of our own doing. We are just instruments of God to do that. And God empowers us with God's Holy Spirit, with the Holy Spirit, for us to do this. So you turn again to other Pauline material in Romans, in Corinthians, and in Ephesians, and you see how the Holy Spirit showers both the individual and the community with gifts that allow us to restore community with one another. The first movement is this one, and this is the genius of Lutheran confessional theology, chapter 4 and chapter 6 of the Osborne Confession. That gets at the heart of what God is up to in God's world. And God has composed for all of creation these two movement symphony in which God says, I am restoring community with you on account of Christ. And because of Christ, I am declaring you justified. And then the second movement of that symphony, once I have restored community with you, I am charging you with that task of restoring community among yourself. And that's what Paul describes in this text addressed to the Corinthian community. Through Christ, God is restoring community with you. And then God, through Christ, is entrusting to us the ministry of reconciliation. At the end of that text, there comes a charge using a very specific word saying, so we are ambassadors for Christ, since God is making his appeal through us. So in this process, then God comes to us with a job, and that is to be ambassadors through whom God is making God's appeal to the world. And God's appeal to the world is for us to live in a community that is restored by God's action through Christ.
I could not have said that like he does. But that sets the scene, I think, very well for what accompaniment is.
We could just say amen to that. Huh?
Exactly. Thank you. Okay, so we're done. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, well, Penny, I think it's been good. And we're 17 minutes in, so.
I had not heard that from those passages before explained like that. And, Pastor Chris has also mentioned in the past about how, because we're beloved children of God, it frees us to do God's work. And that whole idea of freeing us is a concept that I'm still kind of working on. That whole idea of it's a different way of looking at it. It's not looking at it as a requirement or a must do, but a freeing of to be able to do. So that gives a different look at it, I think. At least for me, it does.
The other wonderful, wonderful explanation of that passage that I have heard, and I'm sure Don and Eunice, you have heard it also, is from Mark Jacobson, who has told it from the Maasai point of view, where God is connected to man through the umbilical cord, who has come, anyway, God is connected to man through the umbilical cord that has been come down to earth, and that umbilical cord has been broken. And so the reconciliation is the restoration of that umbilical cord with man to earth. And Mark has just a wonderful, wonderful way of explaining that. And that whole reconciliation between God and man. And so anyway, the justification and the sanctification is something that I have not been able to explain before or understand before. And I think that that is the best explanation, and the best explanation of accompaniment and what it is that we are supposed to do. So anyway, I think I would like to talk about the 5 accompaniment values, because they further explain accompaniment and what it is that we are supposed to do. There are the values of mutuality, the fact that we all have gifts, that there is a giving and receiving, and that instead of power over people, there is power with, and that instead of gifts to, that there it becomes relationship with. The second accompaniment value is inclusivity. We build relationships. This is one that takes great effort and courage. We really have to look very intentionally to see who is being excluded. This is something that we're going to have to continue to look at as a people and as a church, and as we look at culture and how that impacts everything that we do in our lives. Vulnerability is one that is really tough for us, because in all our culture, vulnerability is looked at as a weakness. And Jesus became vulnerable to and with us. And we have to remember that it is not a weakness. For the first time, COVID-19 gave our partner church in Watasi and in the Iringa district a chance to see our vulnerability as a people. And they have been praying fervently for us. So that is an accompaniment value, to share our vulnerability as people mutually. That is hard for us. And we have to remember that Jesus was vulnerable with people in his time on earth. And that is something that we have to work on always. Empowerment is a value. We have to share resources to sharing. We in the past shared resources. Now we share decision making. It's not just, I will give you $5,000 and this is what you will do with it. Now it's sharing decision making, sharing everything, empowering people to be who and what they will be. Again, tough for us. We're always used to being in charge, and that's tough. It's tough for us as a people. And sustainability. Relationships are complex and they require much attention over time. We can't depend on 1 or 2 people or a small committee of people. We have to make sure that these relationships are, or projects or whatever it is that we are doing, that they are sustainable. So these are the 5 values of accompaniment. From a context perspective, we will get into this more, but historically, we acknowledge historical positives. Churches have been started in the mission work that has been done. There has been a lot of education and healthcare provided through the mission work that has been done by church. But from a negative perspective, oftentimes local cultures have been denied and ignored. People have been excluded from decision making. And local churches have experienced dependency. They have not been autonomous. They have not been able to make their own decisions. So there have been a lot of negatives from a historical perspective. And if we look at the current context, there are, since 1900, the Christianity in Africa has just exploded. Within a few years, there will be almost 600 million Christians in Africa. There are more Lutherans in Tanzania now than there are in the United States. They have begun sending missionaries from Tanzania, from Africa. Rather than us sending missionaries to Africa, they are sending missionaries from Africa. The Christians in Europe, on the other side of it, the total numbers are dropping astronomically. They're by 2025, the numbers are dropping by 18 million. So it is very much of a juxtaposition of what is happening. And so that affects accompaniment very, very much.
Michelle, can you address, so they're sending missionaries. So when they send missionaries, what are they doing when they send their missionaries?
Same things that we have done. You know, they are sending missionaries to they are sending some medical missionaries. They are incredible evangelists. They have, I think they could run circles around us when it comes to evangelism. They are sending evangelistic missionaries, but they are also sending some medical missionaries to support some of the medical sites as well. And they certainly know the culture much better than we do in many cases. So same things that we have sent them for.
I'm just envisioning them sending missionaries here and going, okay, no, what are they going to tell us? Or what are they going to do alongside us? You see what I'm saying? It's like, you know, if their numbers are increasing so much and other places it's not, just the whole thought of us being mission 2.
When our team from Trinity was in Motasi, for example, in 2018, one of the things that we realized was that we could really learn from them about evangelism. Evangelism was a strength of theirs, and youth and family ministry was a strength of theirs. And so we felt that we could learn from them in those 2 areas. So that would be something that, you know, we could learn from them.
Mm-hmm.
Could we just add that so often when we talk about missionaries one way or the other, we always think of it in terms of doing. What are we doing? And the reality is, and this is the accompaniment model, we are building relationships. And it's only as you build relationships that you can find out what it is that you can do together that can be sustainable.
We have, thank you, Don. We have, you know, in the last.
Good. Just a minute, Michelle. It sounds like there's somebody that has their mic on. If you could turn your mics off, unless you're talking, because we're getting some background. Thank you. Go ahead, Michelle.
In the last several trips that I have taken, people have said, what are you going to do? what are you going to do? And there has always been somebody that has said, you know, I don't know. I don't know if I can take the time. I don't know if this is the trip for me. I don't know if I'm going to fit in. I don't know if there's going to be enough for me to do. And I have always had to say, you just need to trust. I know this is really hard to do. I know this sounds just kind of crazy and difficult to understand, but you just need to trust. And we are so used to being human doers. We are human beings, and you need to just be comfortable for this one time to be a human being. We're going to be, and you have to be comfortable to just go there and be, and God will provide, because it's going to unfold, and whatever it needs to be, it's going to unfold. And it always, always has. And just that walking alongside and that being together, whatever it is that's supposed to unfold, it always does. And we never know what it's going to be. And it just always unfolds. And that's a really, really hard thing for us as people to just say, well, what is okay? You're going to Africa, you're going to the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, you're going to, I don't know, you name the place, Grantsburg, I don't know. And what are you going to do? And you are just going to walk alongside. Maybe you're going to your neighbor's house and you're just going to sit alongside that person and you're just going to be. And that is going to be the day that something just unfolds. And I think about the day, and many of you know that I wrote a book back in 2010 called Unexpected Journeys. And I didn't know it at the time, but that book was about accompaniment. And God just provides. And you just, when you are with people and you open your heart, God just provides. And maybe it's going to be just sitting alongside someone and they tell you their story and they've never had an opportunity to do that before. And they needed to do that and they needed to have somebody understand or whatever. But yeah. So anyway, and that, I think, those of you that are on this call and who are many who were involved in the warming space emergency winter shelter last year, signed up to just be alongside the people that came in the door. And you were there for them, for whatever it was that they needed. And I think that you would agree that you answered that call to just be, and whatever their needs were. So that was so much of Accompaniment 101. So this is part of the whole textbook. in Accompaniment, and there are three stories. There's God's story, there's my story, and there's your story. And in the textbook aspect of it, we always know that, you know, God is on our side. So that means that you are the other and you are on the other side, because God is on my side. And that's kind of the traditional way of doing mission. If we look at the story that you all know of the lost sheep, it looks a lot different when you use accompaniment as a lens for that story. In that story, there are two groups. You've got the 99 sheep and you've got the one lost sheep. So where is the emphasis in that story? Typically, it's on the one lost sheep. The shepherd leaves the 99 and goes to look for the one lost sheep. If the emphasis is on the one, the problem is the sheep is lost. You determine that sheep's needs and you find it, and you know, the sheep is thankful and blah, blah, blah. Otherwise, if the emphasis is on the 99, you know, they're the problem, they're incomplete. And when you find the lost sheep, they should be thankful. But in either one of those scenarios, somebody's lost, somebody's incomplete, they've got a problem and need to be found, and they need a solution. And we as a people are very good problem solvers. We Americans don't like to waste time. Americans in general can be really good at coming up with solutions before we understand the problem. Excuse me. The problem is when we use this story to describe what we do incorrectly in mission. When we assign ourselves the role of the shepherd and determine who are the lost ones and who needs to be found and what they need in order to be found. After all, we're on God's side of the line, and the you or the other is on the opposite side of the line. But those we decide we need to find or save are going to tell us we're not lost. We knew where we were and what we were doing. It's interesting that for the churches that are following the lectionary, today's lectionary lesson is from Luke 2:41 to 52. And it's the story of 12-year-old Jesus going to Jerusalem with his parents for Passover. And he stays behind in the temple, as you know, when they leave for home, except that his parents don't miss him until the first night after they left with their group. And they find him, as you remember, 3 days later, teaching and learning in the temple. And of course, they were frantic. But what did he say? I wasn't lost. I was here where I'm supposed to be. So another way to look at this 99 sheep, one sheep story is that the 99 aren't whole without the one. And if you translate that to mission, that's a different reason for engaging in mission. We acknowledge that we aren't whole without the church in Africa. We're not whole without the church in South America or Puerto Rico or Asia. We are not whole. We go there to see how the presence of God is manifest in other people, and our faith is enriched. And no matter where we go, God is already there, and he always has been. There are so many ways to think about this, including respecting native religions. It makes my heart break to think about what some of the elders said that they learned from their grandmothers on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation about spirituality in the earth, and then what was done in the name of boarding schools. And Reverend Malpika Padilla, who we saw in the video, also says that when we look at the sheep story with the emphasis on the one, missionaries become pearl merchants. They go to determine the lost sheep, what the lost sheep needs, and they sell stuff. So they're pearl merchants. But when missionaries look at things from the viewpoint of the 99 sheep, they become treasure hunters. They go to discover what's already there. So now we are treasure hunters. But I love to think of that we never take God someplace. And, you know, there used to be people would say, oh, so you're a missionary. And oh, that just made me cringe, because I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure God's already there. So here's some of the other things that I have been learning in the last 10 years that I think are such an important part of this whole accompaniment piece. And that's that there have been impure motives in mission. And you heard in the beginning about the historical context, and this is part of that. This is a big part of that. The Doctrine of Discovery. In 1455, Pope Nicholas V issued a papal bull or decree. It authorized Christian nations to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all enemies of Christ, take their land, and reduce their persons to perpetual slavery. The Doctrine of Discovery is colonization of the entire world in the name of Christianity. It resulted in immense loss to indigenous peoples around the world. Papal bulls or decrees of the 15th century gave Christian explorers the right to discover lands, to claim lands that they discovered, in quotes, and lay claims to those lands for their Christian monarchs. It's about expanding our church and planting our own flag. Then Pope Alexander VI, in 1493 and subsequent years, issued 3 papal bulls, which said that because Europeans are both civilized and Christian, and the native peoples are not, the first European sovereign to discover any lands on a continent owns said lands, not the native nations. And in the expansive interpretation of those bulls, the Europeans gained absolute legal title to the land. So in contrast to that, now our role is to accompany the church that is already there, not to convert them to our specific church or religion, but to mutually share the good news of Jesus Christ. Importantly, in America, the doctrine of discovery was solidified as a foundation of federal law as it applies to tribal nations as a result of the Supreme Court decision in Johnson versus McIntosh in 1823. And I think it's important that we have to recognize the genocide. If you haven't seen the video, The Canary Effect, I encourage you to do so. It is available on YouTube. I have it on a DVD, and I'm happy to lend it to anybody that would like to borrow it. As many of you know, before Columbus, there were an estimated 60 to 90 million native peoples in North America and Central America. And by 1890, there were only 800,000 Indians remaining in North America. And that was a direct result of impure motives in missions. Cultural superiority, which we are dealing with now and looking at, is white supremacy. Comes out of the manifest destiny doctrine. And we confused the messenger with the message and believed that God had given the white community a task to civilize the world. You might be familiar with this painting called American Progress. It was painted in 1872 by John Gast, and it pictured manifest destiny. The woman is Columbia. She is the female figure of America. I'm going to get my cursor out here, and she leads Americans into the West and into the future by carrying the values of republicanism, and that is seen through her Roman garb, and progress, and that is shown through inclusion of the telegraph wires and other technological innovations like the railroad and so forth. And also clearing native peoples and animals. And if you notice, they are pushing the native peoples and animals into the dark. And they're pushing them here into the dark. They're clearing them out of the land. And so this is a picture of the manifest destiny and the taming of the West. And it saddens me greatly. Another impure motive in mission is the romantic notion of going somewhere, going to an island. And this one is really tough for me because I love this song. I love singing this song. I love the tune. I can belt it out with the best of them. But if you read the words, this is part of the romantic notion of mission. I can hear my people cry, who is going to bring God's light to them? Who will I send? Oh God, here I am, I will go. And I believe that this is part of the romantic notion of, I am going out to save the world. I can do it. Give it to me, God. I will go and save the world. Not, I am going to walk alongside. I am going to just be and walk alongside. So, accompaniment helps us see mission very differently. Helps us put our stories together. through Christ and the action of the Holy Spirit, our stories, where the stories intersect, truly becomes our story. And it's a very different picture. Another thing that I think,
Michelle, before you head on to that, so one of the questions I have, and I think many of us remember hearing this as kind of our due diligence as a learning in confirmation classes, is that Bible passage that talks about that, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And I see the use of that passage as justification for how mission has been. So how is that reconciled? And if you don't want to answer it, maybe Don can answer it.
I don't have the answers for everything. I think that can partly be, I mean, yes, there is evangelism. Evangelism still needs to take place, but I think that we have to be very careful. We don't have pith helmets and we're not walking through the jungle saving souls. I really do believe that God is everywhere and that many people have religion and spirituality. Yes, there are people that have not heard the message. And we absolutely need to bring the message to those people. So absolutely, we need to bring God's message to those people. But for the people that have already received God's message, it's not our job to convert them to our version of God's message or beliefs. Don, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, what I would just add is that when the admonition is to go and make disciples, we have to be mindful of what it is we are bringing with us that is going to walk alongside of those folks that we share the gospel with. And the gospel is not something that forces people to believe. The gospel is carried with us to plant the seeds. And there's just a lot of ways in which that seed can grow. But, it's sort of like the 1 and the 99. We're nothing is complete unless we are 100 together.
Thank you for just kind of refocusing that. Appreciate it.
Well, may I say, I don't believe the early explorers came to the Americas with any religious intent whatsoever, but only to find gold and silver and whatever they could enrich themselves with and bring back to Europe. And all these doctrines are merely a pretense and have nothing to do with God or religion whatsoever. And to answer Penny's question, what can they do when they come to the United States? They can begin to teach us not to be a divided nation that's split 52-49, so that we can get back to our mission of uniting ourselves before we go out trying to unite the rest of the world.
Thank you, John. Nice comment.
I want to be mindful of time. I know we have just a few minutes, and I want to touch on a couple of other things that can kind of trip us up a little bit in our accompaniment. And this is one concept that is part of our, that we have to be mindful of. And that is the appropriate, what to do when. And this is when we do relief, when we should be in transition, and when we should be in development with people. And this is a talk in and of itself. So I just want to say that relief is something that we are really good at as people. And it saves lives, it's short term, and unfortunately it's what we rally around and do best because we love a good emergency, and it involves stuff, delivering food, clothing, and tents after a disaster, but it doesn't have lasting impact. But it's where we pour a whole lot of energy. And it's charity, it's working for something. It's urgent and it's short term. But unfortunately, we oftentimes continue to do relief when we should be doing development. And so we have to be mindful of when we should be doing development instead of relief. Development is truly accompaniment. And if you look at what many of our partners like Lutheran World Federation and so forth are doing, they are doing development, and much of what Lutheran World Relief is doing, they're involved in development. You do relief on the short term, you do development in the long term. Providing education, job training are tools that lead to a sustainable lifestyles, and they empower individuals and communities to survive and eventually prosper over time. So I would like to just kind of keep this in mind and ask yourselves questions. Is relief appropriate right now, or is development appropriate right now? Do people need stuff, or do they need empowerment and ownership and capacity building? And what is the right response in this situation? Is this an emergency, or is this a long-term? Solid Ground that you're going to hear, that we are going to hear from next week, is a really, really good example of development. So anyway, good concept to keep in mind, and it trips us up. Another thing that trips us up, and this is part of the whole relief development conundrum, is that we get stuck in our confusion over poverty and money and stuff, and our hang-ups over scarcity and sufficiency. And it clouds our judgment about what people really need. Because we need something does not mean that somebody living in a hut, or somebody that is living in their car, or somebody that is living in a one-bedroom apartment needs something. And so that clouds our judgment sometimes, and causes us to do the wrong thing. And so these are concepts that we just have to be mindful of. And I just bring them up for you to stop and think sometimes. I want to go back to those 5 values. And this is an example that I want to bring up about something that happened that is really, really good. And it's that whole shared vulnerability thing. Alefsa is one of our partners in Watasi. And I have known her since I first went to Watasi in 2005. And I would say that she is just my dearest friend over there. And she has always been just bubbly and bright and just alive. And she has been such a leader in the church, and always right there with everything. And when we were there in 2018, she was a different person. She was just sad and withdrawn and just morose. Just we learned in a visit to her home one evening that her husband had passed away very unexpectedly from diabetes. And that was what had caused the change in her. And what was really cool was that Marie, who was in our group, was able to share with her that her husband, her former husband, had passed away from diabetes. And you could just see the light come into Alexa's eyes. And she just said, really? In the United States? This happened? And it was that shared vulnerability that she had no idea, first of all, that this had happened to anyone else and that it could happen in the United States. And you could just see that sharing in that moment made such a difference to her. I think it was really something. And so there's a lot of value. There's a lot of value in just being able to be, and you just never know what's going to be placed in front of you. This is another situation that I'd like to just really quickly share, and then we'll end and take any questions. I mentioned Mark Jacobson and the ministries that he has been so instrumental in developing in Arusha, Tanzania. They've been there full-time for about 35 years until about a year ago, and they continue to serve there part-time as well as elsewhere. The facilities that they built are excellent examples of accompaniment ministry. In 2013, 4 of us women from Trinity were privileged to join a hospice team one afternoon on its rural patient visits. And it was truly accompaniment in action. This is a Maasai compound or boma. The patient was a man in his 30s with advanced stage AIDS. And he's in the left on this picture under a tree. He's right over here. I don't believe he could actually walk, so he would have either had to drag himself over there from the boma or hut, or he would have had to have someone help him get into that position. But he sat with his feet wrapped in cloth up to his ankles, revealing his lower legs covered in lesions. One of the opportunistic diseases that piggybacks on AIDS is Kaposi's sarcoma. It's a type of skin cancer responsible for his lesions. Reality set in when the nurse asked to examine his feet and he removed the cloth bandages. The stench and the flies were something that I had never expected. His feet were swollen and gangrenous, and the nurse remarked that they must be very painful and offered to clean them. She took out the gloves that she had along and the anesthetic and a pan, and she knelt alongside him and cleaned his feet. And it was really such an incredible privilege to watch Jesus' hands and heart in action. It was truly accompaniment in action. I am going to stop there. I have some other examples to share with you, but I will stop there and see if you have any questions.
You can go ahead and just unmute yourself if you want to ask a question.
Michelle, that was very moving. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think you've brought a lot of additional light into what it means as far as accompaniment, and pointing out, you know, like when you talked about the 5 values, you got to vulnerability. And my question was, and how do we get better at being vulnerable? You know, I just, it's something that I don't know if our culture is very good at, especially when we're so quick to want to judge and blame others for anything that's not quite right. It really puts a roadblock up. And I guess the whole idea of how do we support people so we can be vulnerable? Because I don't think as an individual, it's a very easy thing to do.
It's really hard. One thing I did that I think it's important for us as a church, with the whole racial unrest that we had in our country this year and injustices that occurred, we had a visit that was done to our congregation in Watasi this fall, with Deacon April Trout and some other representatives from the Oringa Diocese. And they brought a letter from us to the congregation there and read it and explained it and had a conversation about it. And one of the things I did in the letter was I did talk about the George Floyd killing that happened in Minneapolis, because we know that they watch our news and hear about the things that are going on in the United States. And I talked about the racial injustice in our country that started with slavery, and that we have not handled it appropriately, and we know it. And I said that I wanted that we, and there was no I in the letter, so I want to make that really clear, but that we as Trinity, who have been there in Watasi so often, wanted to apologize to them for everything that we may have done unknowingly because of our ignorance. That was inappropriate while we were in the village, and that it wasn't right to ask for their I don't think I said it wasn't right to ask for their forgiveness, but anyway, that we wanted to apologize to them for anything that we may have done while we were there, and that we would try to do better and to be more sensitive. And that we had formed, that we were learning as a church, that one of the things that was our goal was to learn as a church about cultural differences. So we approached it head on. And that's part of the vulnerability.
Michelle, thank you. This was wonderful. The parable of the 99 sheep reminded me of a statement, I'm not sure who said it first, but that racism isn't a Black problem, it's a white problem. It's the majority and dominant who is broken and not right with God.
That's kind of a good perspective.
Well, and it's kind of like hunger isn't a scarcity problem, it's a distribution problem.
Anybody else have anything today? Want to be respectful of your time? I thank you so much, everyone who's taken the time out of your day. This has been recorded, and so it will be available sometime. Pastor Peter's the one that normally takes care of it, and he's still on his time off, so that is why he hasn't joined us today as well. But he will get it on the website so you can view it again. But thank you so much, Michelle. You've given us a lot of great information, things to consider, maybe some things that will bring more conversation among us with our friends and family as far as what we learned and what we feel we might need to continue to grow with, which is a great way of spreading the word on that. Anyone else?
Just a historical note that it was 500 years ago today that Martin Luther was excommunicated from the Roman Catholic Church.
Are you talking about becoming a rebel, John? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, what do you think, Benny?
Well, there is a good rebel in you. I think of John Lewis's statement of getting into good trouble. Anything else?
I would just like to mention that there is a new book out that we have not fully read yet. We've only gotten into the first few pages, but it's called Lutheran Mzungu. And it's Mzungu is has become a Swahili word for like being the white person in the midst of a black setting, a black culture. And the author of this book is a writing consultant for the University of New Hampshire. That individual, along with her husband and another couple, were part of our New Hampshire connection with a parish in the Iringa Diocese. There was an African by the name of Joe Lugala, who was also the anthropology professor at the University of New Hampshire, but also a native Tanzanian. And Russ Hilliard and Dot Kasich were going to go over there to be a teacher, to teach at the university. And so prior to going, she wrote to Reverend Lubawa and wanted to introduce herself and get information about their coming. She wrote, no answer. She wrote again, no answer. And finally, she and Russ went and had a meeting with Joe Lugala and wondered why Richard Lubawa was not responding. And she was saying that she was going to go over there to teach in the spring semester. Joe had to remind Russ and Dot that in Tanzania, there are not 4 seasons, fall, winter, spring, summer. There are 2 sessions or 2 terms. They don't go by semesters. They have a first term and they have a second term. So obviously she didn't understand the culture to which she was writing, and that culture did not respond to her until she finally wrote back to Richard Lubawa and said, I understand my mistake. Help me understand how we're going to fit into this picture. And then he wrote back. So understanding the culture is a huge, huge part of our vulnerability and our accompaniment role. Thank you, Michelle. You did a wonderful job.
It was fabulous, Michelle.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys.
Thank you so much.
Everything
Very
that everybody
inspiring.
is doing.
Right now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Have a
Bye-bye.
great day.
Thank you, Michelle. If you want
Thanks,
to,
everybody.
Michelle, if you want to give me the hosting back,
I'm done.
you can, and then I can make sure everything gets tied down or wrapped up. Do you know how to do that?
I can, participants, security. I
Think if you just click on my name, it might allow you to give me the hosting.
make host. There you go. Thank you.
You're welcome. See, this was fabulous. You did an awesome, awesome job. I loved all the information. It was really, really good.
Thank you
Really
so
good.
much.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so, so much. This is going to be great to have around. And yeah, you did a lot of awesome work.
You don't think it was like too slow or too anything?
No, I think that, no, you know, you brought so many different pieces to it that I hadn't heard as far as
Good.
background and resources and things like that. So no, that was awesome. That was awesome. And, you know, I've got some more work to do in learning more about this. So,
Good. Well, I'm glad that those other pieces, they have been helpful for me. Because those, you know, those are things that I have learned over time from taking classes and whatever. And to me, they're all just intertwined. So
yeah, this was really great. So, thanks so much.
I'm glad it worked out okay.
Oh yeah. You did great. You did great. Nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about.
Well, and you know, it was nice having Don and Eunice there, but you know, I just think about, we put them through the ringer for how many years? Oh my gosh. Talk about needing an apology.
Well,
An apology to them.
yeah, they're dear folks. They're dear folks. I always love it when they can come. So anyway, I will let you go and enjoy the sunshiny day. And I will probably talk with you soon. I'm going to go visit my parents and then I'll be back in town.
All right. Thanks a bunch, Penny.
Thank you. Thank you so much again.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care.